The hospital room smelled of cold coffee and sterile wipes. A beige curtain was half pulled around my bed, like a sad little stage for a play I didn't know I was in. He was sitting in the chair by the window, a man with kind, tired eyes that watched me like I might vanish. I'd woken up 10 minutes ago, and the doctors had just left. They said a lot of things about the accident, about recovery, and then they said the part that made the room tilt. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice a dry whisper. "They said you're Evan. You're saying we're..." He didn't move from the chair. He just let the word hang in the space between us, heavy and impossible. "Married," he finished softly. "For 3 years, Lily." I looked at my left hand. The band on my finger felt foreign, a cool, smooth circle of platinum. I didn't remember it. I didn't remember him. The last thing I knew, I was 25, living in a walk-up in Brooklyn, chasing a promotion. My mind was a book, and someone had torn out the last 5 chapters. The man in the chair. He was the protagonist of a story I'd never read. "I don't know you," I said, and the words felt cruel as soon as they left my mouth. His expression didn't break. There was just a slight, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. A wince he swallowed down. "I know," he said. "That's okay." They sent me home to an apartment I didn't recognize. It was beautiful. Open plan, high ceilings, sunlight pouring over plants that looked thriving and loved. Mine, apparently. Ours. Every corner was a museum of a life I'd curated but couldn't tour. Evan moved through it like a ghost, careful not to startle me. He slept on the sofa without me having to ask. The first week was a silent film. Me, drifting from room to room, touching things. A vintage camera on a shelf, a charcoal sketch of the Manhattan skyline, a mismatched coffee mug that said, "World's okayest architect." Him, always there, but never too close. Making tea, folding a blanket. His presence was a constant quiet hum in the background. "Do you want me to explain anything?" he asked one evening, his voice careful. I shook my head, a sudden panic rising in my throat. "No, not yet." I was terrified that his explanations would feel like someone reading me a Wikipedia summary of my own life. I needed to feel it, or not feel it. I didn't know. He just nodded. "Whenever you're ready, or never. It's up to you." That was the thing. He never pushed, not once. When I found my current project files on my laptop, a museum redesign in Chicago, he didn't bombard me with details. He just said, "You were really passionate about the light in the atrium." When I stared blankly at the spice rack, bewildered by my own organization, he'd quietly say, "You developed a love for smoked paprika. It's in everything." A small, amused smile would touch his lips and then fade, as if remembering I wasn't in on the joke. I started to notice the safety he built. How he'd leave my favorite kind of apple on the counter. How he'd play this specific, mellow indie folk playlist in the evenings that somehow made the silence between us feel companionable, not empty. He was reintroducing me to myself, not through facts, but through echoes. And I started to notice him, the way he'd run a hand through his dark hair when he was thinking, the faint scar above his eyebrow he got God knows when, the solid, calming way he occupied space. I caught myself watching the way his hands looked, holding a book, competent, gentle. One rainy Tuesday, I had a meltdown over a client email I couldn't parse. The frustration boiled over, at the work, at the blank spaces in my mind, at the sheer unfairness of it all. I was crying, angry tears hot on my face, when he appeared in the doorway of the home office. He didn't come in, he just leaned against the frame. "The Lily I know," he said, his voice low and steady. faced down a city zoning board at 27 and won. She doesn't get defeated by a difficult client. She gets creative. I looked up, sniffling. That's a nice story, but I'm not her right now. Yes, you are, he said simply. You're just a different version. And this version will figure it out too. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me with the gift of that belief hanging in the air. He believed in me, even when I was a stranger, maybe especially because I was a stranger. That was the moment the careful, patient man stopped being Evan, my husband I can't remember, and started becoming Evan, a man I was deeply, undeniably curious about. We began again, not from memory, but from scratch. He asked me out for coffee. A real date, he said. At this little place in the West Village we supposedly loved. I put on a dress and felt nervous. He held the door open, and his hand didn't brush my back. The restraint in him was a physical thing. We talked for hours, not about us, about everything else, movies, politics, the weird architecture of the building across the street. He made me laugh, a real, surprised laugh that felt like finding a forgotten $20 bill in an old coat. I saw the light in his eyes when I talked about design, a light that said he was genuinely listening. He was fascinating, kind. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't with the grief of a man looking at a ghost. It was with the tentative hope of a man seeing a new dawn. I was falling for him. The realization was a quiet earthquake. It felt like a betrayal of myself, of the woman I used to be. But also, it felt inevitable. My heart was pulling towards his gravity, and it was a force as real as anything I could remember. Then I found the box. It was on the top shelf of his closet, behind some sweaters. A simple wooden keepsake box. My name was carved on the lid. A part of me knew I shouldn't open it, but the part of me that was falling in love with a man I was already married to, that part needed to know. Inside were photos, ticket stubs, a dried flower, and a small silver thumb drive. I plugged it into my laptop with hands that trembled. The folder was labeled, Lily Just Because. There were dozens of video files. I clicked the most recent one, dated just 2 months before the accident. The screen filled with my own face, but a version of me I didn't recognize. My hair was different. My smile was effortless. I was sitting on this very sofa, looking at someone behind the camera, my eyes shining with a love so raw and complete, it stole the air from my lungs. Okay, stop filming, you dork! My on-screen self laughed, swatting playfully at the air. Nope, came his voice, warm and teasing from behind the camera. I'm documenting it. Tell the camera why you're the best wife. On screen, me rolled her eyes, but the affection was a radiant thing. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Because I put up with you. Then she softened, her gaze going deep and tender. And because you make every single ordinary thing feel like magic, you make my coffee just right. You know when I've had a bad day before I even say a word. You're my favorite person to be silent with. A tear, happy and bright, traced down her cheek. I love you, Evan Morgan. I love you so much, it's my favorite fact about myself. The video ended. I sat in the silent apartment, the echo of my own profound love ringing in my ears. I had loved him. Not the gentle, patient man I was learning to love now. I had loved him, fiercely, completely, joyfully, and I had forgotten. The pain that crashed over me then wasn't sharp. It was vast. It was an ocean of loss for a love I couldn't reach, a love that belonged to a woman who lived in my body but wasn't me. I had been so focused on the injustice of my loss, of my confusion. I never truly understood the weight of what he carried. Every day he looked at me and saw the ghost of the woman who said those words. And every day he chose to love the stranger she'd become. I heard his key in the lock. The front door opened softly. He came in, shaking rain from his coat, a paper bag of groceries in his arm. "Lily, you okay?" I turned the laptop screen toward him. The paused image of my own tear-streaked, adoring face filled the space between us. His whole body went still. The easy, hopeful light I'd seen growing in him these past weeks drained away, replaced by a quiet, familiar sorrow. He'd been here before, in the aftermath. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of it. "I loved you so much, and I just left you here alone with it." He set the groceries down slowly. He didn't come to me. He just looked at the screen, then at me, his eyes holding a lifetime of lonely remembering. "You didn't leave me," he said, his own voice thick. "You're right here." "But it's not the same." The cry tore from me. "She knew you. She remembered your story. All I have are feelings, this pull towards you that I don't understand." Finally, he crossed the room. He knelt in front of me, his eyes level with mine. He didn't touch me. "Lily," he said, my name a prayer on his lips. "Look at me. You feel a pull? That's all that's left when everything else is stripped away. That's the foundation we built. That's your heart. And it..." He took a shaky breath, his composure finally fracturing to show the raw hope beneath. "It still knows me." I reached out then, my fingers tracing the scar above his eyebrow, a landmark I now knew, a landmark I loved. The touch was electric, familiar and new all at once. The woman in the video loved him with her whole remembered history. I loved him with my fractured present and my uncertain future. But it was the same love. It had to be. It came from the same heart. I leaned my forehead against his, our breath mingling. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we'd lost, and everything we were somehow, miraculously finding again. "My heart chose you once," I whispered into the space between our lips. He smiled, a real smile, full of a pain-soaked joy. "Yeah, it did. And it chose you again," I said, the truth of it settling deep into my bones, a new kind of memory, even when I didn't know why. He finally closed the distance, his hand coming up to cradle my jaw. His kiss wasn't a reclamation. It was a new promise. It was soft and hesitant, and bursting with a hope so fierce it felt like a beginning. When we pulled apart, I knew. The past was a country I couldn't return to, but he wasn't asking me to. He was asking me to build a new one with him, right here, starting from this fractured, beautiful moment. And I knew, with a certainty that felt older than memory, that if a heart could find its way home twice, through darkness and ruin, it would never get lost again. The kiss changed everything and nothing at all. We didn't magically fall back into a married rhythm. How could we? But the invisible wall between us, it dissolved. The space felt charged now, not with the awkwardness of strangers, but with the terrifying, beautiful potential of something new, growing in the ruins of something old. He stopped sleeping on the sofa. He moved into the bedroom, but we shared the bed like tentative roommates, a canyon of crisp cotton between us. Some nights, I'd wake up from a fractured dream, my heart pounding with a fear I couldn't name, and I'd hear his steady breathing in the dark. Just hearing it would calm the storm in my chest. My body remembered his safety, even when my mind did not. We started building a new language, our own shorthand. "It's a paprika kind of day," he'd say when the sky was grim and low, and I'd laugh, knowing it meant he was making the hearty stew I'd apparently invented. I'd leave my blueprints spread across the dining table, and he'd carefully move his coffee cup, but never shuffle a single page, respecting the chaotic order I needed. We were two scientists, carefully documenting a new species of relationship. I found myself wanting to give him something that wasn't a memory, but a choice. So I asked him on a proper date. I planned it all. Dinner at a tiny new Italian place in Soho that had no history for either of us, followed by a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. The September air was crisp, carrying the smell of the river and distant traffic. Walking beside him, our shoulders occasionally brushing, I felt a wave of something so profound it made me stop. I gripped the cold railing and looked out at the glittering spine of Manhattan. "What is it?" he asked, his voice soft beside me. "This feeling." I started, searching for the words. "It's like my bones are happy. Is that crazy?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "No," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's not crazy. That's how it always felt, from the very beginning." He'd never spoken about the beginning before. I held my breath. "Our first real date was right here," he said, nodding toward the bridge. "You talked my ear off about the engineering, the tension, the symbolism of it all. I just watched you, your face all lit up, and I thought, my bones are happy." I didn't have a better word for it then either. A tear escaped, tracing a cool path down my cheek. He wasn't giving me back a memory. He was giving me a piece of our poetry. And in that moment, the ghost of the woman I was and the woman I am now, they overlapped. We both loved this bridge. We both loved this feeling. We both loved this man. I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. It was the first time I'd initiated contact like that. His fingers tightened around mine instantly, a reflex, an answer. We stood there, hand in hand, as the world moved around us. Two people holding on to a single, unbreakable thread. But life isn't a montage. The world intruded. My physical therapy ended. I went back to work full-time. The museum project was in its critical phase, and the stress was a live wire. One evening, after a brutal day of meetings where I'd had to constantly mask my confusion, I came home to a silent apartment. Evan was working late. The emptiness echoed. The fear crept back in. What if this was it? What if I never fully returned? What if he woke up one day and realized loving a shadow was too hard? I went to the closet. I took down the wooden box. This time, I didn't watch the happy videos. I searched through the photos until I found one that looked different. It was a Polaroid. The colors faded. We were both younger, dressed in hiking gear, sitting on a rock. We looked exhausted, dirty, but we were leaning into each other, my head on his shoulder. On the white border, in my handwriting, it said, "After the fight, still us." A fight. We'd had fights. Of course we had. It was a shocking, comforting revelation. Our love hadn't existed in some perfect, untouchable vacuum. It had weathered storms, real ones. I heard his key in the lock. I stayed on the floor, the Polaroid in my hand. He came in, looking drained from his own day, but his eyes softened when he saw me. "What's that?" he asked, sinking down to sit opposite me. I handed him the photo. "Tell me about this fight." He let out a long, slow breath, a small smile touching his lips. "We got hopelessly lost on a trail in the Adirondacks. I was stubborn and insisted my phone's GPS was fine. You were practical and wanted to turn back hours earlier. We snapped at each other for a solid hour. It was cold. We were hungry." He traced the edge of the photo. "Then we found this rock, sat down, and shared the last protein bar in silence. And you just leaned your head on me, like that. And I knew it was over. The argument didn't matter. We were a team, even when we were wrong. I looked at the photo, then at him. We're a team now, too, I said, the words feeling incredibly vulnerable. Even though I'm wrong, even though I'm broken. His expression crumpled. He moved around the coffee box, closing the distance between us on the floor. He took my face in his hands, his touch firm, grounding. You are not broken, Lily. You are different. And I am falling in love with different. I am in love with the woman who looks at me now, in this moment, and chooses to trust me with her fear. His thumb brushed away a tear I hadn't even felt fall. That's a choice the old you never had to make. This is braver. He kissed me then, and it wasn't like the first one. It was deeper. It was a claiming and a surrender all at once. It tasted like salt and hope, and a future we were writing in real time. We stayed there on the floor, surrounded by the artifacts of a love that had persisted until the city lights outside grew bright against the deepening blue. The climax wasn't a dramatic memory return. It was quieter than that. It was a Tuesday 3 months later. I was in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes from a recipe I'd Googled. I was humming a song, a specific lilting melody. I stopped, the spatula frozen in my hand. I knew that song. I knew it. But not from the radio. From him. I walked into the living room. Evan was on the sofa reading. The afternoon sun cut across his profile. Without a word, I went to the old record player in the corner, a piece of furniture I'd always admired but never touched. I flipped through the crate of vinyl beside it, my fingers moving with a certainty that wasn't my own. I pulled out a worn album sleeve, The National. I slid the record out, placed it on the turntable, and lowered the needle. The first few mournful notes of I Need My Girl filled the room. Evan looked up, his book forgotten. His eyes went wide. This is our song, I said, the statement solid in my mouth. It wasn't a question. Not because it's happy, because it's about needing someone even when things are dark, even when you're lost. The memories didn't flood back in a wave. They seeped in like light under a door. A flash of us slow dancing in this very room, barefoot. A flash of him playing this song on a road trip, both of us singing softly. No context, no full scenes, just feelings, anchored to a melody. I walked over to him. I took the book from his hands and placed it on the table. Then I sat beside him, curling my legs underneath me, and laid my head on his chest, right over his heart. His arms came around me, holding me tightly, his face buried in my hair. We didn't speak. We just listened to the song, to the steady, strong beat of his heart under my ear. I will never remember everything. The last 5 years are a landscape seen through fog, a hint of a shape here, a flash of color there. The love I had for him, the detailed day-by-day construction of it, might be gone forever. But this new love, it isn't new at all. It's the same love, stripped back to its essence. It's the root system that survived the fire, and it's growing back, stronger, because it's chosen, every single day. I lifted my head and looked at him. I may never remember our wedding day, I whispered, but I want to marry you again, in every way that matters now. A single perfect tear tracked down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. You already have, he said, his voice thick with a joy that had weathered a long, long night. Every morning you look at me and don't run away. You're choosing me all over again. He was right. This was our vow. Not spoken once in front of friends, but whispered daily in 1,000 silent ways. In a touch that said, I'm here. In a look that said, I see you. In the simple, breathtaking courage of building a life on the foundation of a feeling when all the blueprints were lost. The song ended. The needle lifted with a soft click. In the quiet that followed, I knew the truth with a calm that settled deep in my soul. My heart chose him in a sun-drenched past I can't recall. It chose him again in a fractured, fearful present, and that means no matter what the future holds, no matter what I remember or forget, it will choose him forever. It's the one thing amnesia couldn't steal, the one thing that was and is and always will be mine, ours.